So how do we start?
I would say, let's see here. All right. So, long time no see, and I guess we said this a while ago. We were going to talk about Autopilot V2 or Autopilot Device Prep. What are we calling
Mhm.
it?
Well, it depends who you're talking to. If you're talking to Microsoft, it's not Autopilot V2. It's probably Autopilot Device Prep. It's
E-
not the new version of Autopilot, though, is it? That's not what it is.
It's not, and I'm pretty sure somewhere in the logs, and I think they still refer to it as AP V2, but they still call it Azure AD Join also. So
In
that's
the logs.
in the
Yeah.
logs. Confusing terror logs are a different area. Yeah. So
Yeah.
what were you saying? It came out four months ago or so, at least
June-ish,
publicly.
yep.
Yeah, somewhere in there. And get asked. I was getting asked a lot about it at the time. I know I did some content, you did some content on it, but I think we've just what turned out as two busy calendars ended up being enough time for us to look back and say, well, how's it been?
Mhm.
For a few months. So I guess what's your take on autopilot device preparation over the last few months?
Yeah, so there was a lot a lot of noise about it, right? When it
Yeah,
first came out, maybe it was all Rudy. Rudy does have a lot of
blame
a
Rudy.
lot of followers and does kind of dive quite deep. And Autopilot V2 sounds like such a cool name.
Yes.
So I don't know if it was kind of as much as there was a big hoo-ha about it, there was such a noise. Microsoft were kind of downplaying it, right? They were saying this is just another way of doing autopilot. And when you look back and go, actually, it is just another way of doing autopilot. You don't need to move to it. It's not the next step. It's just another way of using autopilot. And I haven't got any customers who have a use case that needs this version of this way of using autopilot. What about you?
Same. I've had. I think folks see it. They see new things in Intune and they say, "Ooh, what's this?" Device prep, and it's not very clear that it's different. I think. I actually I was able to see some of it in preview, and I had a lot. I had different like aspirations for it. I think at the time, but yeah, to be honest, I think really what it comes down to, and for those who don't know, right, it's a very user-driven um, provisioning method where there is no pre-registering of the hardware. You can identify the device, right, and we'll show that in a second. You can tell Intune about it, and but nothing happens until the user signs in. And I think the problem with that is a core. It's like a core. Well, it's the opposite of the core functionality of Autopilot. The idea, because Autopilot was just, I mean, it was really a Microsoft take on Apple's device enrollment program. Hardware registered at procurement, and that's what made it work so well
Mm.
because it had that communication at the hardware level, and they kind of took that away. So I know my first, I did kind of a, I forget I'm not streaming video games anymore. So sometimes I do like, oh, this is my first reaction to doing a thing, and it's, I did my first reaction to using it on one of my videos, and I was like, oh, that's, I'm clicking through the EULA, and it's asking me if it's a personal device, and I can name it, and I'm like, that's
Yeah,
not good for business.
yeah. But then looking at Autopilot V1, I don't want to do that. Looking at Autopilot normal, the original
Normal
version of
autopilot, yeah.
Autopilot. I don't know we should figure out how we're going to refer to it. Otherwise, this could be a very long
We'll call
video.
it V1. I'll call it. Let's go
V1.
V1.
All right,
I'll
let's
take.
let's
I'll
go
take it.
V1.
We'll blame
All right.
Rudy. That's fun.
Okay. Okay. So with Autopilot V1, that wasn't a great way of provisioning a device anyway. Unless you bought the device from an OEM or a reseller, you had to do the hash collection and remember the hash collection wasn't like a technical limitation. It was a protection from people being people and
Yeah.
abusing the system by adding all of the Lenovo devices in the world to their tenant because it's easier.
Yeah.
Um, so that had that massive flaw, right? And have they gone too far the other way uh, by making it not need that, but then not need anything?
Well, I think they just. I think if we take a look at Autopilot, V1, it just finally I think has enough legs now. Because when it first came out, if you remember, it wasn't a 4K hash. It was like a 1K hash, right? In like very early in preview, and then when they went the OEM, they said, well, the OEM can do it, and that was just Lenovo to start. But now we're at a place where resellers and partners can just use the serial number, the model number, and they can post it no problem. So when we think enterprise for procuring, they don't have to deal with the hardware hash as much anymore. I mean, for testing, sure, and for retroactive enrollment, but I think Autopilot is finally at a place where it's I would say the most solid it's been. So instead of elevating that experience, now we have this alternative method of, well, no one registers. So you're kind of right. It's completely the other way. The only problem is if, unless you're going to deliver someone a Windows Enterprise device, which is very difficult because nothing ships with Enterprise, then someone doesn't have to register that PC and they can, bounce it right into their own personal machine. So not to say that everyone would want to do that, but yeah, it's a pretty big open door. So yeah, I don't know.
That is an open door. That is massive.
Yeah.
So let's go on to that a little bit more.
Yeah.
So if I ship a device to a user and I haven't it's not enterprise, it's pro or home.
Yeah.
Give it to the user and they open it up. They can log in. They get that choice, don't they? Home versus home versus work. What if they choose home and try and do some things? Is there anything an enterprise can do?
No, that's your gaming computer now. That's your personal machine.
No, I don't mean is there anything they can do to stop someone doing that, because it's obviously it's under the user's control. Yeah. But is there anything an enterprise can do to stop it being useful as a work device? So then they have to call IT and go, hey, I've done this and I can't do X.
Yeah.
And they say reset or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think at that point, you're relying on things like conditional access.
Right.
That's where you come back to those good habits where it's like, because I don't see it as a. That's kind of the way I looked at it when folks say, well, what if they don't enroll? Say, well, they won't be able to work. So unless you're onboarding someone and they went through all the trouble to get hired to get a free HP corporate laptop, and they're just gone now. No, I think in most circumstances, someone would start trying. I think there would be no malicious intent. I think a user could get confused because that's not necessarily a very clear, option. Mm-hmm. And they would end up with a machine they can't use, call help desk, say, oh no, reset it, and then choose this option. So I think communication would be critical for it. In talking to some folks, I've done some content where, well, we can flip to enterprise first, or we can do a provisioning package. But then it's like, well, now we're back to someone's touching it beforehand. So where's the benefit of Autopilot? But yeah,
and I guess is it not just, we've always had this option when you buy a PC from a store, right? Yeah. You get this personal or work choice, personal or corporate choice. Who owns the device, right? And we've always had that. And even before Autopilot V1 arrived, we had that choice.
Yeah.
And Autopilot V1 took that choice away, right? By telling the device that it was corporate.
Yeah.
And what we've done here is said with V2, or this new version of doing Autopilot, we haven't agreed how we refer to it. We'll call it V2. With V2, we've said, if you choose corporate, we're going to secure it. We're going to make it a proper corporate device. We're going to autopilot this device because you've chosen corporate. And if you choose personal, then it's your personal device. You chose personal, it's a personal device, right? And so it's kind of giving the user that choice, which isn't a new thing. We already had that choice with buying a PC from the store. And choosing corporate was always a possibility, but it meant that they had a much worse experience than if it was an autopilot device. And now they choose corporate and they get a better experience because they get all the apps coming down the same way. They get deployed stuff to their device through enrollment time grouping. So I think it's another way of doing autopilot, isn't it?
It is. I think a lot of that's going to fall back on the maturity of the organization, because there are a lot of scenarios where I can see, that's a better way to work, right? If I can, if I know I have a good security posture, meaning I have conditional access, nothing's going to hit unless it's enrolled in Intune. If I know I have if I'm confident in users being, I get kind of sick of the trope being, oh, well, you don't know our users, they're pretty bad and this and that. It's like, yeah, but I don't think that's necessarily true anymore, where, users never touched a computer. Users are also are customers who buy iPhones and buy laptops and set them up. So I think that's not a bad thing. I think it's the comfort level of the organization. We look at the average organization moving from, I talk to folks every day who still are afraid of stopping imaging, stopping domain join. So even Autopilot, V1, the idea to them is, well, we're just going to ship this to a user. So now take that one step back and say, hey, Mr. Smith, we're going to give you so much money to go procure your own PC and just choose work and sign in. So I don't think it's the technology. I think it's, unfortunately, a lot of these organizations' cultures that are going to be a problem with this.
Yeah, exactly. And just going back to that thing where you say the security posture matters, and if you have a good security posture, if you're confident with that, remember, you could do that. Even if we're not talking about Autopilot, you could take a PC from a store, any home PC, and try and log into it with your corporate credentials, right? That's not changing. That's still a risk that you need to solve with security anyway. And just making Autopilot V2 use that mechanism doesn't make it any more risky. It's not a new risk that you brought to the organization from a security perspective. It's just maybe highlighting the fact that you've got a wide open door that you've not been looking at for the past 6 years.
I think so. I do see a lot of personal enrollments allowed. I just did some content on it where I was showing how easy it is to fall into Intune enrollment from a personal side. Again, like you said, right? I think that's always been there, and I don't think it's malintent on either the organization or the user. I think it's just, if I'm on a personal machine and I think, oh, I want to access my email, and that pop up, it's already checked. Let my organization manage my device, which I think should not be checked. So I think it's just another, like you said, it's another avenue you're probably exposing with this, covering.
And there's no malintent from the user, perhaps, but if an attacker was to be able to do that, an attacker would be able to do that, right? That's
correct.
There's no difference between the user and attacker except intent. And they could easily enroll a device, and then they've got a strong factor, right? They can get access to stuff, and they can use that device to get persistence in the environment, gain other MFA tokens, depending on how your conditional access is set up. Terrifying. It could be,
you're in at that point, right? Unfortunately, you're in, and you have a device. You might have a cert on the device, and like you said, it's all about that posture. So regardless, that's always a strong place to start. So scary. Could be.
All right. Well, enough talk. Can we? Well, obviously, we're going to keep talking while you share your screen.
Should we? Never enough time.
We're not just going to do that mute, right? just turn off the mics and just configure it. Should we have a look at what it looks like when you start configuring it?
Yeah, that's fine. So I'm in my Rubik's Div tenant, and start by taking a look at it. It's located in devices and enrollment. And it's got its own little section down here between enrollment options and Windows Autopilot. So, they kind of separated out. So device preparation policies.
Just looking at that, so they have separated it out. You're right, but it's not exactly clear.
No.
What the difference is. Use Windows Autopilot Device Preparation to streamline configuration.
It almost looks like an add-on to, like, a way, hey, do you want to do something extra to make Autopilot better? That's how I interpret that. Like, of course I want streamlined reporting and troubleshooting. Why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
That's
all right. So that could be better. That's unfortunate, but never mind. Let's go into it.
Yeah, I think it could be better. So I had some stuff here I was playing with, but I'm going to ignore this and start fresh by creating a preparation policy. I don't remember this being here. So they do kind of tell us a little bit more. So I guess the idea is it's a single policy that handles apps, scripts, essential policies. Okay. small number of policies, apps, scripts to reference. Windows Autopilot will report the installation. Yeah, I think this is one of those things. Will report the installation status for these items. I mean, this is, I think, the one thing, and we'll look at it, but this is what everyone wishes they would bring to the original Autopilot. The actual reporting, because unless you're sitting there staring at the screen as an admin, you have no idea until much later what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's you know a tricky thing. This also gets this was also a bit confusing to folks. Let me close this. Something was giving me some notifications. This is something that I think confused a lot of folks. There's essentially two groups you have to play with the new device prep. You have to play with a user group. These are the users that are going to get this when they sign in. But then you're creating an Enter ID group that the devices will land in. And that's
We had that with V1, right, where you had to create this group, but that was to target the devices.
That was to target the enrollment profile. This is telling it, hey, once I've got you, this is where you're going. So that was the tricky part. Is it's the inverse. So original Autopilot, I register devices, I pre-set up the group to catch them, whether it's registered through Autopilot, my group tags, which is my big thing, group tags, and then everything gets deployed to this. This is saying, hey, we don't know who you are, so once the user signs in, now we're going to say, oh, this is an Autopilot device. We're going to put it in this group. So it's a little backwards. And I think that was the most confusing thing for me as I was explaining this to folks. And I think there was one video I did where I'm pretty sure I confused myself during it, because I think everyone got confused. I didn't have any good answers.
Wasn't there something about needing like the owner of that group to be a specific service account, which they changed halfway through the release just to make it even more?
They did. They changed. It could be like one of 3 accounts, or it wasn't there, or you had to make it yourself. I would have to go back and look at my my stuff on it, but we'll see. I'm hoping it's not that way now, because I forget all of it. So we'll just go through and see.
Yeah.
So easy enough though. We get to name it. So we'll say the YouTube Autopilot Device Prep. Okay. So this is. So right here, this is where folks have to stop, right?
That's where we're going to stop.
Yeah. So I'm going to actually just duplicate this. Just maybe cut that screen out, because I got different credentials from different companies. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to go to groups, and let's see if I can find my way through this. So I'm going to call this YouTube Autopilot Device Prep Group for Devices. It's a very long name.
That's just I always like organizations who put the description of the group in the group name.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
organizations are terrible for that. So this is the part here, the owner.
Yeah.
So the owner has to be, what did it say?
Service principal. It has to be, before you configure device groups, make sure the Intune provisioning client service principal has been added as an owner.
Okay, so it's not called Intune provisioning client. It might be that, but let's.
What's that? What's that at the top?
That could be it. I think it might be it, but
how would you know?
Well, that's why I want to go back here. So this is like kind of why, because this is what I would have to do.
Yeah.
So I'm going to open the link.
But
so already it's a little off the rails, because that's not clear. And before I go look for it, I don't understand why I can't create the group from here.
Yeah.
That would be better. Like, because this is what people don't like. Because already you're lost. I already had to make a new tab, and it's left to me to kind of make it work. So it would be create Windows Autopilot Device Preparation policy. The device group. Here it is.
We're in the step. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so owners. Search bar, Intune provisioning client. Okay, so that was it. You're right. Intune Autopilot confidential client. So in some tenants, it has that name instead of that name. But as long as you're looking for, that's the principal GUID. So F1346, F1346. So that is it. So it sounds like if you search Intune, you have to have this. Now I know another issue though, and this looks like it's what they're addressing. If they're not available, you have to add it yourself. So now we're playing with the graph. And I'm a big fan of the graph and using it. I love it. I love it. I think the problem is to use Autopilot, they're like, hey, if it's not in your tenant, can you go finish building it for us? That would be swell if you could do that. So
yeah,
this, I now it's starting to come back to me, all those feelings. How when we started this, I'm thinking that this should have been hashed out by now.
Mm-hmm. And if it wasn't bad enough that they named it wrong the first time and then had to name it again, they then go, actually, if we just forgot to put it in your tenant at all, just pop it in for us with these nice commands.
And I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that if you do it, I recall a situation where if you did it this way, it got another name, like a third name. But I don't remember if that was all the time. I know I saw that at least once. So if either these two names, Autopilot Confidential Client or Provisioning Client, if they weren't there and you had to manually add it, I think it got a third name. But I'll digress on that. And let me see if I can find what we were doing. So yes, this is the owner of that group. So the Autopilot, the Intune Autopilot service is the owner of the group.
And this is the only situation where in Intune, any configuration I've seen in Intune or Entra, where you need to add an owner of a group for something to work. Is this them kind of just hacking away at a thing that already exists to make it work? Like, because as a group only, you can change memberships, right? That's probably the point, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, clearly they want clear. So here's some of my thoughts, and I don't know, right? Maybe Rudy knows. I think
just bring him in.
Bring him in, right? I think when I think about this stuff, I think, okay, they want, because we've tried to do this with group tags, people want when devices come into provision, they end up in certain groups. That would be a really slick part of provisioning. Hey, when this device goes through Autopilot, it gets these apps, it's here, and then it goes in these three groups. I think this is a step towards that. But in order to do that, it would make sense that this principle in Intune would need ownership of the groups, because they are entry groups. But why this got pushed up to the front end so much, if this should have been an inherent feature of the product, is interesting to me. Like, they could do this part here, I feel like. You could create the group, they could add the owner for you. Like, if it's created in here, it gets that owner. So that part,
but as an example, Windows Autopatch, right? You've seen Windows Autopatch, you've seen how that works. You tell it to do something. You tell it you enroll in the Autopatch service, and it creates all these groups for you, and then manages the group memberships for you. I don't need to create the group and add an owner, so a service principal.
They're creating this. I believe you get an app reg, right? They create a service principal in your environment. So that's that's a really good point. That's what should have happened here. Yeah. Smart. Yeah. That's kind of what we need here. So yeah, Microsoft, we need you to make a app reg for this.
Do what you did. Do what you did with the
Just
app
do it again.
thing.
So this is basically telling us this is where the device will go once it enrolls. So that's what that group was for. Now we're at the configuration settings. So this is very familiar. Deployment mode, user-driven. I think that's all it supports.
It's the only one choice, isn't it?
Yeah, and I can't see it supporting another one because there's no hardware registration, so it can't self-deploy. single user, same thing. Of course, no hybrid join. That would just complicate it to no end.
Yeah. Although I'm sure someone has done it. Someone will have made that work just
Sure.
because. Yeah.
Because they must hybrid join. That's a separate
Exactly.
conversation. Standard user or admin. That's nice that it's a simple switch now. So you still get that option. So that's pretty cool though, because even though, if we look at some of the bright sides, even though you're going through this device prep and it didn't start with hardware registration, you can still suppress the administrator role to that first user. So
and that's what I was suggesting with they've taken the thing that already exists, which ends up with the user being insecure, as admin.
Yeah.
So this then secures that route that they were already going to go through anyway.
Yeah, I would say that's a big positive then, which is good because it's nice to have some positives. Now, a lot of this, and this is kind of what I like, they took the some enrollment status page elements and brought them into the Autopilot profile. So minutes before showing the installation error, I always leave it 60, right? You can do a custom error message, allow user to skip the setup after multiple attempts. That one's tricky for me because I would probably say no, because they're just going to wind up, if something really is failing, and again, thorough testing is always needed. Same thing with original Autopilot, because if something does fail, you ultimately don't want a user to use a PC that's missing something critical on it, like an EDR solution or Office or just anything. If a cert failed, so
but what would skipping setup do?
So I believe what it does is it takes you right to the desktop, unprovisioned, and I guess Intune would continue to try to push the apps or policies. Yeah, there's a similar setting in Autopilot V1 in ESP where it's like allow the user to use the machine if it fails. But to me, that's I don't think that should be. I would almost rather see someone have a good remoting solution to come in if it does fail. IT can remote in and look, because as a best practice, we don't. That's kind of the whole point. We don't want folks using these if they didn't provision correctly. That's how I feel about it. Now, this is another thing that I think it's confusing in original Autopilot and here. These are like reference apps. So same thing with ESP. These do not assign the apps to the user or device. These are basically saying, if these apps are targeted to that group that you set earlier, right? That device group we said earlier, where the device is going to land, you have to make sure you're going to assign these. So for example, if I want to, I have so many apps. If I want to do 7-Zip and I have Office, Azure Monitor Agent, sure. Microsoft 365 apps. No, I don't have that. What's going on here? Oh, I have so much garbage in here. This is bad. Nobody look. Okay. I've chosen 3 apps. That's the best I can do right now.
And I think, is that not because you do so much reviews of solutions that publish apps to?
I do everything. Someone's gonna have to lock me out of my own tenant and clean it. I'm pretty sure I do too much stuff. But the idea here is this is how Autopilot will know when your provisioning is done. Like once these 3 apps are there, you could and these 3 apps have to be assigned to the device. You might have 20 apps assigned to the device, and they'll come down later. So just like with original Autopilot, this is just the reference of how it knows when Autopilot is provisioned. So don't worry, because if you have some users, you say, well, some users don't get Visual Studio Code. That's okay. It'll ignore it. It won't say, well, you can't provision until this is done. It's only if it's assigned. But it also does not assign them. I want to make that clear. And they did give us the ability to do the scripts too. So I guess we can have script to remove bloatware. It looks like I'm uninstalling retail teams. So you can include scripts in this as well now, which I guess can be pretty helpful to lock in certain scripts and not have to wait for everything. So yeah, as long as you're assigning them to the same group, you should be good. But I like that this is all, so going back on like the positive note, that this is all in one area. It does make things a little easier.
Agreed. But only in contrast to Autopilot V1, where
Yeah,
you have the Autopilot deployment profile and then the ESP,
right.
and you can have multiple ESPs depending on the user. It
Yeah.
very, very not straightforward at all.
I also still find that some folks don't know about the ESP. They don't turn it on, and it's because
Right.
you wouldn't. Nothing guides you there. So at least this is one shot,
Good.
which is good. Um, of course, you can apply your RBAC scope tags if that's something you do. I don't really have anything in my tenant, so I'm going to leave it as default. But you could, of course, apply whatever you want. And now assignments. Now this is the tricky part. This needs to be a user group. This can't be a device group because it'll never get it.
That wouldn't make sense.
It's based on the user. So what I've done is, what have I done? Let me search for Autopilot. Okay, so I made an assigned group called Autopilot V2 users. And I've just manually placed users in the group, right? Rick Jones, Bruce Wayne. So they're in here, meaning these users, when they sign into a device, they are allowed to go through. If they choose the work or school account, they will receive this profile here. So I'm going to add them in. Device Autopilot V2 users. Now, something else I don't like. Notice it's showing me everything. I can pick device groups. It can't work on device groups. So I'd really like some kind of filtering. It's like, help me a little bit. Help me a little bit.
That is a fair point. That is a fair point.
Yeah. You could also do assignment filters. So if you did have like all users plus, putting a filter, but yeah, it just
sorry.
Won't
Go into the assignment filter. I didn't realize that was there. What's that?
Yeah. So you can put if you have filters set up, now my filters are all device filters.
But isn't that what the filter is? Isn't
you wouldn't have a
devices?
user filter. Oh yeah, never mind. So that doesn't really make sense then, because it can't be assigned to a device. Huh. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Never mind that.
Although, hang on. Could it apply? Could you have like a filter for Lenovo devices? Include?
Well, I guess the problem is it won't know yet, because this happens pre-join because it's user based. So how much telemetry can it collect that fast? Because I feel like
it doesn't use telemetry though, does it? It does it locally on the device, the filters.
Well, it needs to know what
decision.
Decision when it goes through. That's interesting. That would be something to test if you can apply the device filter to the user group for the V2 assignment. That'll be one.
Because then you could say only Lenovo devices support this.
Do a model number. You can do TPS. Yeah, that'd be interesting. Yeah, definitely something to check. Yeah, you're right. There wouldn't have to be any telemetry. Yeah. That's definitely something to check. We'll follow up on that one. Try to get creative with it. And then it just gives you a chance to review my name, the device group. That's where the devices are going to go. I can review my deployment settings. I can see the apps. I can see the scripts, any scope tags I chose, and of course my user group with no filter at the moment. At that point, you are done as long as your apps are assigned, right? And your policies, just like everything else, you'd want everything assigned to this group now. You should be good to go. And I think, I don't know how long last modified. I clearly haven't done this in a while. I just wanted to see if I wanted to look at the reporting real quick. But I forget it might be in monitor. Windows Autopilot Device Preparation Deployment Status.
There it is.
So I'm okay. I still have some from all those times ago, and this is kind of again another positive to end on. This is what everyone wants in Autopilot, and they put it here.
Yeah.
So if you look at a successful one, you can see the device ID it got, the serial number, it was a VM, right? But if we look at the apps, we can see now after all this time, it looks like it never finished reporting that, but it did get whatever app that is, probably something I deleted since it's just a GUID, my Autopilot branding, my company portal. So you're actually reporting on it, which is something you couldn't do before, which is really nice. And I believe you could do the same with, let me go back to it because I X'd out, with scripts. Again, it's been some time, but at least you can see, or if something fails, right? It failed. Why did it fail? Well, all the apps got installed, but perhaps apparently it was a script I removed. Device available. You can grab the diagnostics right from here, right? So
Yeah.
if they were uploaded
Oh,
beforehand,
that is good,
let me
right?
actually try that again on a better one. So, okay, only if it failed, you can grab the diagnostics. It looks
That
like
makes
some of these
sense.
aren't here anymore because they don't have names. I have a
Yeah,
lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
stuff in my tenant, but yeah, that is nice. So if you do have an issue, right, you could download that. So yeah, say this was a failed device, you download diagnostics, and it'll take you to the directly in Intune where you would collect them.
Yeah.
So, and I want to show this because this is a massive plus, right? And my hope is eventually this is an element that will carry over to the V1 autopilot
Hmm.
or the original one. But
Hmm.
so
But I think there are limitations as to what they can do with V1. It is
yeah,
what it is with the registration bit, right? That limitation is going to stay. That the hardware hash thing.
yep,
Um, I think there's limited. It's good to see that they've put some development effort into Autopilot, even if it is Autopilot V2. It's good to see that they have actually made some effort, because
yeah,
for like many years, there was no innovation at all with it. So it's
right.
good that they have actually made some changes.
Yeah, it's good to see, and I think we'll see. Look, if they decide to put more of the innovation here and keep going with this, great, and make this the way and give us answers to a lot of the other things. Because I don't think at the end of the day, as long as we can set up the device, in a secure way with what people need, and we can do it, very stable way that's faster. I don't think anyone cares about the hardware hash, um, as long as we can do that. Dean, do you have a
Yeah, I
wish
agree.
list for any autopilot, like V1 or two? Like what you would like? What's the number one thing you would love to see autopilot be able to do that it can't do today?
Ah, that came out of nowhere.
It did.
I No, I'm happy. I was happy with Autopilot as it
Yeah.
was. I'm reasonably happy. I think the only thing that really frustrates me with Autopilot is how cumbersome it is to get the Autopilot hash into Intune in the first place.
Right.
And they've made a lot of improvements with that recently around being able to collect the hash via, you can do it via scripts. There's loads of ways to do it and
The
convert,
online switch. Yeah.
but you can also convert all target devices to Autopilot. You can do it
Yes.
that way. And I think they've made some subtle improvements and made it possible to get around the fact that you have to go to the device and type in those commands. And not only do you have to type in those commands, you have to set the execution policy to bypass. There's so many steps to getting
Yeah.
that hash from a new device. I
Yeah.
think that's if they could figure out some way to make that better without just saying we don't need it, then that would be my wish, because I think V1 does have a place still, but
Yeah.
I'm not a diehard fan of V1. We can move over to V2, and if that's how we have to go.
I mean, it would be nice if they gave Microsoft partners have the API that doesn't need the hash, right? The serial
Sure.
number model. There, I would almost, and I thought I heard rumblings of it, but maybe not. Sometimes I hear things, but sometimes I think it might make sense for certain organizations to give them access to that API to say, here's a list of our models and serials. We're just going to go do it, so they don't have to touch the box. And I know that's what the partner or the vendor is supposed to do, but I think there's an argument to be made for an organization who wants control. And if they did that, um, then the hash problem goes away. So that would be something
I guess it goes away for some organizations, the
for some.
elite few.
Yeah, you'd
Doesn't
probably
go
have to be
away
pretty
for
big to get that
you.
API opened up too,
You
I would
do.
imagine.
And to be honest, I mean, I don't know this, but that might even be true already. They might already have that available to huge organizations. I'm not
It
really.
might be. Yeah, maybe that's where I
Yeah,
heard it. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, could be possible. But
Mm.
yeah, well, hopefully, I think overall, that at least gives us a look back on where we are. So not much has changed. Definitely, I would say the best part is the consolidated profile and settings and this reporting. And the worst part is making the groups with the service principal. That's too much work for a user, or not even a user, for an average endpoint administrator to require them to possibly make their own service principal in the graph, I think.
Especially when that's already been overcome many times by app registrations and it's already been fixed. It's the only thing where I've seen you have to do that and make the device, the service principal, the owner of the group. It's a weird. It's like they've taken this flow the configuration flow that you were looking at, and tried to use that and only that to solve the problem, which means that you need to do a load of stuff outside of that to create the user.
That's a good point. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So this was a nice chat, Steve.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Maybe we'll get some news hopefully right around the new year about more stuff with this. But yeah, for sure.
You think there's news on the horizon? Have you heard something I haven't?
I haven't. I would just expect. I would think.
Right.
Yeah, I would just expect that time of year, maybe right when 2025 starts. I would think, but might be nothing. Who knows?
Yeah. All right. Well, this was a lovely chat. Thank you, Steve.
Absolutely.
We should do this again.
Absolutely, we should. Yeah. No, always welcome down here in my basement.
All right. See you soon.
Take care, Dean.